Chapter 11. Creating an Authorship Identification Program. This chapter covers writing an authorship identification program using top-down design, learning about refactoring code and why you would do it. In Chapter 7, we learned about problem decomposition and top-down design when we wrote our spelling suggestions program. Here, we're going to take top-down design to the next level and solve a much larger problem. We're still doing the same thing as in Chapter 7, dividing a problem into subproblems, and further dividing those subproblems into sub-subproblems as needed. And just like before, we're looking to design functions with a small number of parameters that return a meaningful and useful result to their caller. It's also a good sign if we're able to design functions that are called by multiple other functions. That helps reduce code repetition. We're including this chapter because we wanted to provide a more authentic example than the spelling suggestions problem we solved in Chapter 7. We hope our example here is motivating and feels like a real problem that you could imagine yourself wanting to solve. In this chapter, we're going to write a program that tries to identify the unknown author of a mystery book. It'll be an example of a program that uses artificial intelligence, AI, to make a prediction. We couldn't resist the opportunity to include an AI example in a book about programming with AI. Section 11.1, Authorship Identification. This problem is based on an assignment created by our colleague Michelle Craig. Let's start by taking a look at these two book excerpts. Excerpt 1. I have not yet described to you the most singular part. About 6 years ago, to be exact, upon the 4th of May 1882, an advertisement appeared in the Times asking for the address of Miss Mary Morstan and stating that it would be to her advantage to come forward. There was no name or address appended. I had at that time just entered the family of Mrs. Cecil Forrester in the capacity of governess. By her advice, I published my address in the advertisement column. The same day there arrived through the post a small cardboard box addressed to me, which I found to contain a very large and lustrous pearl. No word of writing was enclosed. Since then, every year upon the same date there has always appeared a similar box, containing a similar pearl, without any clue as to the sender. They have been pronounced by an expert to be of a rare variety and of considerable value. You can see for yourselves that they are very handsome. Excerpt 2. It was the Dover Road that lay on a Friday night late in November, before the first of the persons with whom this history has business. The Dover Road lay as to him, beyond the Dover Mail, as it lumbered up Shooter's Hill. He walked uphill in the mire by the side of the mail, as the rest of the passengers did. Not because they had the least relish for walking exercise, under the circumstances, but because the hill, and the harness, and the mud, and the mail were all so heavy that the horses had 3 times already come to a stop, besides once drawing the coach across the road, with the mutinous intent of taking it back to Blackheath. Reins and whip and coachman and guard, however, in combination, had read that article of war which forbade a purpose otherwise strongly in favor of the argument, that some brute animals are endued with reason, and the team had capitulated and returned to their duty. Suppose we asked you whether these two excerpts were likely written by the same author. One reasonable assumption you might make is that different authors write differently, and that these differences would show up in metrics that we could calculate about their texts. For example, whoever wrote the first excerpt seems to use quite a few short sentences in terms of number of words compared to the second excerpt. We find short sentences like, there was no name or address appended, and no word of writing was enclosed, in the first excerpt. Those kinds of sentences are absent from the second. Similarly, the sentences from the first excerpt seem to be less complex than those in the second. Look at all of those commas and semicolons in the second excerpt. This analysis may lead you to believe that these texts are written by different authors, and indeed they are. The first is written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and the second by Charles Dickens. To be fair, we've absolutely cherry-picked these two excerpts. Doyle does use some long, complex sentences. Dickens does use some short ones. But on average, at least for the two books that we took these excerpts from, Doyle does write shorter sentences than Dickens. More generally, if we look at two books written by different authors, we might expect to find some quantifiable differences on average. Suppose that we have a bunch of books whose authors we know. We have one written by Doyle, one written by Dickens, and so on. Then, along comes a mystery book. Oh no, we don't know who wrote it. Is it a lost Sherlock Holmes story from Doyle? A lost Oliver Twist sequel from Dickens? We want to find out who that unknown author is, and to do that, we'll turn to a basic AI technique. Our strategy will be to come up with a signature for each author, using one of the books we know they wrote. We'll refer to these signatures as known signatures. Each of these signatures will capture metrics about the book text, such as the average number of words per sentence and the average sentence complexity. Then, we'll come up with a signature for the mystery book with an unknown author. We'll call this the unknown signature. We'll look through all the known signatures, comparing each one to our unknown signature. We'll use whichever is the closest as our guess for the unknown author. Of course, we have no idea if the unknown author is really one of the authors whose signatures we have. It could be a completely new author, for example. Even if the unknown author is one of the authors whose signature we have, we still might end up guessing wrong. After all, maybe the same author writes books in different styles, giving their books very different signatures. Or we simply fail to capture what is most salient about how each of our authors writes. Indeed, we're not after an industry-strength author identification program in this chapter. Still, considering the difficulty of this task, we think it's impressive how well the approach that we'll show you here works. Machine learning. Authorship identification, as we're doing here, is a machine learning, ML, task. ML is a branch of AI designed to help computers learn from data in order to make predictions. There are various forms of ML. The one we're using here is called supervised learning. In supervised learning, we have access to training data, which consists of objects and their known categories, or labels. In our case, our objects are book texts, and the category for each book is the author who wrote it. We can train, that is, learn, on the training set by calculating features, average number of words per sentence, average sentence complexity, and so on for each book. Later, when we're provided a book whose author we don't know, we can use what we learned in the training to make our prediction, or guess.